In a further escalation, Republicans in the Florida legislature are hearing two bills that would block any company that transports unaccompanied minors to Florida, either by bus or plane, from doing business in Florida. I spoke to State Representative Anna Eskamani about these efforts on Friday. How do you view the immigration bills that are now moving their way through the House and the Senate?
I consider the policy proposal out of the legislature to be just another effort to flame the culture wars and the anti-immigrant fervor that Republicans have seen as necessary to secure election victories. But the damage is caused more so by the executive order, since as we speak now, providers who are mostly faith-based organizations that provide a safe place for undocumented and unaccompanied minors and refugees are already having their licenses be threatened by DCF purely for just doing their job and providing that safe place for these children as they go through the legal process and are hopefully reunited with family. And so I do see the legislative effort to be adding to that. And the irony too is, they say they're going after carriers who have transported unaccompanied immigrants to Florida. And right now we're still waiting for a list of those carriers who would be impacted. My understanding is that there's already been some reporting on this, and the number has been zero of who would even be impacted. So it does seem like a lot of empty threats coming out of the legislature to kind of just add to this anti-immigrant fervor, but the true damage is being caused through this executive order.
What do you think the impact is on those who are here in our community, who came into this community, who we in the past used to always welcome into this community, whether the refugees from Pedro Pan, folks who fleeing from Haiti? The governor has made it seem as if there's a significant difference between Pedro Pan, which was a government-sponsored program, and those who are coming up from Central America, as if they're fleeing something different. The folks who are fleeing from Central America, for instance, they are quite fearful that they will be killed.
Correct. I am the daughter of immigrants. My parents came from Iran, another country with dangerous political institutions and censorship, and made their home in this country. And there's nothing more American than welcoming the immigrants. We are a nation of immigrants. And this legislation really does target children, but it's also part of the governor's false agenda that immigrants are a threat and immigrants equates to criminality. And the reality is that we've actually seen crime rates in Florida declining substantially over the last decade, and yet here we are trying to create fear among a population that's incredibly vulnerable. And I don't see the difference between the Peter Pan fights and what's happening today, because you're right, these are children who are caught in a situation of political upheaval and trauma. They come to the United States and seek a refuge. And the fact that they're being re-traumatized now because of politics, it's cruel for the sake of being cruel. And when you talk to our providers, they're overwhelmingly faith-based. We've had conversations with Bethany Christian Services, Lutheran Services of Florida, the Catholic Diocese. These are the organizations who've been leading the charge and working with the Office of Refugee Resettlement at the federal government level to pay for these programs and to keep these kids safe as they navigate their legal options and hopefully become reunited with family. This has been a program that has worked for years with no problems under multiple administrations, Republican and Democrat at the federal level, and multiple Republican governors. And there's been no complaint until now. So that's an ideology of convenience. The reality is that Florida would be nothing without our immigrant community members. And at the same time, this legislative body, not even a decade ago, approved in-state tuition for our dreamers, for our DACA students who are the children of immigrants who don't have documentation status. And that same legislative body, by the way, also tried to pursue access to driver's licenses for those students, which at the time, Governor Rick Scott, now Senator, vetoed it, but he signed the in-state tuition into law. So I always see this cognitive dissonance because it was just a decade ago where there was bipartisanship around making Florida more immigrant friendly, which is also good for our economy, especially our workforce. But today it's a complete reversal. And the only thing that's really changed is a Trump agenda, is an agenda to appeal to a really extreme conservative base versus trying to make Florida work for every type of person.
Well, is this who we are today in Florida?
It shouldn't be who we are today. I refuse
but
to.
is it? My
My
question is it who we are today?
I don't think so. I mean, when you talk to especially Republican members of the legislature who are of immigrant identity, there is some discomfort with some of these policies. I feel like there's a new litmus test for conservatism that if you don't go along, you'll be primaried and you'll face this type of threats politically. But I don't think that's the majority of people's perspectives. I think especially when you talk about children and unaccompanied minors, there is this collective understanding that these are children who are fleeing places of political violence and physical violence, and they want a safe place to sleep. And these are faith-based organizations who are upholding their Christian values, their faith-based values to do this work. And I think when I talk to my constituents, overwhelmingly there's support for that. That's not seen as something dangerous or scary. But of course, there's politicians who want to perpetuate maybe one example of violence associated with someone who is undocumented. Meanwhile, there's thousands of examples of violence by those who are American citizens. And so it's this conflation that's not based in reality, but for political gain, folks want to emphasize it as being fact.
Let's take a step back for a second. As you look at this year's legislative session, this week there was the late night session to pass the restrictions on abortions, limiting it to 15 weeks with no exceptions for rape and incest. How do you surmise what's taking place right now in the Florida legislature?
So whether it's the abortion ban or what I like to call the Stop Learning Act, which the governor calls the Stop Woke Act, or the Don't Say Gay bill, which is also going to be on the House floor this coming week, these are not problems that Floridians are asking us to solve. These are manufactured debates. When I go back home to my district, the issues my constituents face are affordable housing, it's clean air and clean water, it's good paying jobs, it's safety nets like food stamps not working or the unemployment system not working. Nobody's asking me to go to Tallahassee and pursue these culture battles. I'm forced to respond because I'm in the middle of them. But these are not the problems that people want us to solve, but they become the campaign rhetoric. They become the next mail piece, the next TV ad. So it's a constant pattern of political rhetoric masquerading as a bill. And that's been the entire theme of this legislative session.